What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We are covering the light welterweight 140-pound battle for the undisputed champion. All four belts on the line. We've got Jose Ramirez, 26-0, defending his WBC and WBO titles against Josh Taylor, 17-0, with his WBA and IBF titles on the line. Jose Ramirez is a Mexican-American from California. His folks are from Michoacan. And Josh Taylor, the Tartan Tornado, is from Scotland. Jose Ramirez, orthodox right-handed fighter. Josh Taylor's a southpaw. Jose Ramirez has a reach of 72.5 inches to Josh Taylor's reach of 69.5 inches. So Ramirez being 5'10 and Josh Taylor being 5'10 is almost academic because Jose Ramirez actually has a slight reach advantage. By comparison, Regis Prograis, that was Josh Taylor's most significant win to date. That's how he collected the WBA title to go along with his IBF belt. But Regis Prograis, 5'8", 67-inch reach. Now, I recently did a kind of a early thoughts video to Ramirez versus Taylor. And in that one, I actually labeled it Josh Taylor versus Jose Ramirez, with Josh Taylor being the A side, where if you look at the flyer, it's actually Jose Ramirez that they're kind of billing as the A side, even though I think that it's all academic. Now, Jose Ramirez won his second title before Josh Taylor won his second title. Jose Ramirez won his second title versus Maurice Hooker in a big unification bout where Jose Ramirez was actually the underdog in that matchup, whereas just a few months later, Josh Taylor would win his second title, as I mentioned, against Regis Prograis. So this is truly one of those lightning in a bottle situations in boxing where the guys holding all four of the belts, you got one guy with two, one guy with the other two, and they're both with the same promotional company, Top Rank, so it all works out. Now, my early thoughts video was kind of taking you through the road to how we got to this point where, you know, Jose Ramirez won his WBC belt against Amir Imam, who's a very formidable fighter. In fact, about 7 years ago, he actually beat Yordenis Ugas, who's one of the belt holders at 147, a weight class up right now. That's probably going to be Errol Spence Jr.'s next opponent. But Amir Imam, kind of a slick fighter, was giving Jose Ramirez a little bit of trouble in the early rounds, and the commentators were kind of looking at it like Amir Imam's style kind of had him in the driver's seat in that fight. Now, Ramirez was actually a big favorite in that fight versus Imam. So even though Imam looked pretty slick to start off the fight, you could tell that Jose Ramirez was kind of breaking him down and taking control. Now, he won that fight, he being Jose Ramirez, won it via decision, not by knockout, but he really established himself as one of those, you know, kind of break them down, pin them up against the ropes and let your hands go, hit hard to the body, break them down type of fighters. And then after that win over Imam to capture the WBC belt, Jose Ramirez fought Antonio Orozco, who we recently saw get stopped by Virgil Ortiz Jr. at 147. So Jose Ramirez actually went the distance with Orozco, won it by decision, and then he fights Jose Zepeda, where Ramirez again was a big favorite, but this time Jose Zepeda kind of outboxed Ramirez. You can hear it on the commentary and just to the naked eye watching the fight. You see the difficulties that Ramirez is having catching up with Zepeda, and once he does catch up with Zepeda, it's almost like Zepeda was getting off first and then kind of getting out of the pocket before Ramirez is able to hit him with his biggest shots. Zepeda, by the way, is the guy who fought in, you know, probably the fight of the year. Most publications had this as the fight of the year for 2020 versus Ivan Baranchyk. That was the fight that featured like several knockdowns in the first few rounds before Zepeda eventually put Baranchyk out cold. And it was kind of an uncharacteristic fight for Zepeda because he's usually a sweet science guy, hit and not get hit, but he found himself in a dogfight against Baranchyk, who just brings it. Baranchyk, by the way, actually gave Josh Taylor a pretty good run for his money in that WBSS, which we'll get to later, the World Boxing Super Series, which squared two of the four titles on the other side of the pond away. Josh Taylor found himself in a pretty tough fight, which he did win by a unanimous decision, and he did score a knockdown or two against Baranchyk. And this, again, is before Baranchyk found himself in that slugfest back and forth versus Zepeda, which ended in a brutal knockout where Zepeda knocked Baranchyk out cold. But Jose Zepeda fought Ramirez so evenly that by the time they head into the scorecards, it's anybody's guess as to who won. You know, the vibe of the place and with the commentary kind of suggested that they were expecting Zepeda to get the decision win here, just based on what they saw through 12 rounds. Well, Jose Ramirez was awarded the decision, and so he kind of dodged a bullet right there. And then he moved on to fight Maurice Hooker, where, again, Hooker looked pretty good in the first 3 rounds, but he found himself with his back against the ropes to where you heard his corner, Hooker's corner, pleading with him to keep your damn back off the ropes, because that is where Jose Ramirez is going to be his most effective. He kind of feints his way, jabs to the body, and he'll kind of work his way in to kind of control the ring to where you start running out of real estate, and then he knows that he can start opening up to the body. Now, he has gotten better at being able to open up his punches in open space in the middle of the ring to where he doesn't have to pin you up against the ropes, but pinning you up against the ropes is where he's going to do his most significant work. So that's not where you want to find yourself against Ramirez. And, you know, a better example of somebody who was able to keep from doing that, unlike Maurice Hooker, who again looked pretty good in the early couple rounds, but slowly found himself more and more with his back against the ropes to where he wasn't controlling the spacing, being the taller fighter with the longer reach. He let Jose Ramirez kind of break him down, trap him, work him over, and then kind of finish him up against the ropes. Now, Jose Ramirez's next opponent, which is his last opponent, Victor Postal, a common opponent between Jose Ramirez and Josh Taylor, actually kept the fight in the middle of the ring for most of the fight. And Postal, like Zepeda, fought a very close fight with Jose Ramirez to where going into the scorecards, maybe some were wondering where it was going to go. I kind of felt that Ramirez was going to get the decision because he seemed to be the aggressor in the fight. And I feel like the boxing politics were just such that it just made more sense for Jose Ramirez to score a close decision win. And to the judges' credit, it wasn't a unanimous decision for Jose Ramirez. It was a majority decision, which I felt more or less reflected what I saw in the fight. Now, Victor Postal also fought Josh Taylor in a very spirited way. I felt like Victor Postal was a lot more hurt at a few points in that fight against Taylor, but Victor Postal versus Taylor was close as well. Now, Taylor isn't a move around the ring, control the real estate, and, play cat and mouse where you've got to find Josh Taylor. No, he's kind of he is a taller fighter for the weight class, but he's more of a stand your ground guy. And he's like a southpaw who likes to throw a nice, crisp, pop, double jab. He'll jab low, he'll jab high, he changes levels really well, and you could see this in his, again, biggest fight against super talented Regis Prograis, who we just saw on that, Ben Askren versus Jake Paul undercard, beating Ivan Redkach. So Prograis, a very different fighter than Ramirez stylistically, although I would love to see Jose Ramirez versus Prograis one of these days. Prograis a little bit more like Shane Mosley, but left-handed and not as fast with the power hand. Shane Mosley, I felt, a right-hander, had a more explosive left hook and a faster straight right. But you see the way that they throw their punches and the way that they use their hand speed and athleticism in much of the same way, where they're not super gifted defensive fighters, Prograis or Mosley. Their defense is more so their offense. Basically, the threat of their punch is what kind of keeps guys from trying to collapse the pocket, because you just might get blasted with a lead, power shot, or a nice counter. But Josh Taylor did just enough to win a close fight versus Regis Prograis. I believe it was a split decision win and not a unanimous win. Okay, so it was a majority decision win, not a unanimous win for Taylor against Prograis. This was a fight of the year contender in 2019. But you got to see in that fight, which in that case, it was southpaw versus southpaw. You saw the things that Taylor does to keep somebody with arguably faster hands, or at least somebody who I thought had the faster hands in Prograis. It was less so the case as you're seeing him versus Taylor play out. Taylor's got very fast hands. I believe he has the faster hands than Jose Ramirez. But Taylor, again, likes to throw that right hand lead, double jab. He'll also throw like a very, very nice, quick, and it's not like quick where it looks blinding to the eye, like a Zab Judah left-handed uppercut. But it's just a quick punch in that Taylor's hand is already kind of out there. He doesn't keep his guard tight. He kind of drops his hands like a lot of the athletes do. And so he'll throw a tight right hook that just gets there deceptively quicker. And maybe it's because he kind of holds it out there a little bit to where it's already half of the distance it needs to travel, so then he just turns it over. But he caught Prograis with that a few times, the lead right hook, and he also has a nice straight left. And he's a very nice combination puncher. Again, he's there to get hit because he drops his hands more than you would technically like your fighter to drop him, but he just seems to trust in his ability so much that what looks like it should be a liability actually kind of invites the guy to think that they've got the drop on him, only to get countered with something that was faster than they were willing to hit Taylor with. Roy Jones Jr., famous for doing the same thing. Now, I'm not comparing Josh Taylor to Roy Jones Jr. I'm saying that sometimes their lead right hook works in the same way. But Taylor also mixes in, like I said, a lot of jabs to where it's almost like you're playing the guessing game as the opponent, thinking, is he going to come with a tight, straight line, point A to point B jab, or is he going to turn it over and just whip me with the right hook? And again, being that he's a southpaw, you got to worry about the straight left and a left uppercut. And he'll also kind of throw a looping left hand and mix that in with his combinations. Very tough fight, and you know, that's one of the reasons why the guy's undefeated. Both these guys are. But as I'm thinking about this fight and how I expect it to play out, like the expectations for Josh Taylor have been pretty high. I mean, I remember, like, for instance, Richard Dwyer, you know, he's got a boxing channel online, one of my favorite boxing channels. But he had been singing Josh Taylor's praises way back when Josh Taylor was fighting Ryan Martin in the beginning of that WBSS, the World Boxing Super Series, which I just want to say just for a moment, I love the idea of these boxing super series that they have where most of the fights are taking place in the UK, because they kind of spotlight some of the divisions that are unheralded to the casual fan. Like, you don't have to worry about a World Boxing Super Series, even though it would be great, something like that, where you could actually get the best to fight the best at like 135 lightweight, 147 welterweight, 160 middleweight, heavyweight, you know, the glamour divisions. But the WBSS serves a great purpose because it's actually taking place at, like, where was Nonito Donaire fighting when it was him against Inoue in that final, which I had as my fight of the year for 2019. But like that division, 140 in the case of, you know, Josh Taylor, where he beat Regis Prograis in the finals of that WBSS and had to fight, you know, Baranchyk just before that and Ryan Martin just before that, and Regis Prograis had to knock off Carol Relic, who was a surging fighter at that time. So yeah, they did it at 140, another unheralded division, at least here in the States. And then they did it, you know, famously at 168, where, you know, it featured Arthur Abraham, Jermaine Taylor, Carl Froch, Miguel Kessler, and obviously Andre Ward, who ended up winning the whole damn thing. That's what really put Andre Ward on the map. And again, 168, unheralded division here in the States, even though Roy Jones was, to me, at his best at 168, you know, Americans weren't as in tune to Joe Calzaghe as they were on the other side of the pond. And then they did the WBSS recently at cruiserweight, where Alexander Usyk ended up winning all 4 major belts. So it serves such a great purpose, and I'm so glad that they did that at 140, because it really put Regis Prograis on the map here. It put Josh Taylor on the map to many. But even at the beginning of the Super Series, there was a lot of attention being placed to Josh Taylor, like, man, this guy might be something special. And Jose Ramirez, I see a very good fighter who's still improving. He's only 28 years old, so whatever he is today, he might be better than that by the time he's 30, 32 years old. But right now, I still see enough gaps in his game where now I've seen him outbox a couple times versus Zepeda and versus Postal, even though I think that he should have rightfully edged the fight against Postal, which he did. But I've been seeing him kind of have to adapt after getting kind of outboxed in the early rounds and then being unable to kick it into a higher gear to where he starts convincingly winning the rounds against these sweet science boxers. Now again, this isn't Josh Taylor we're talking. Zepeda and Postal are much more of that move around the ring a little bit, use your space, and, you know, don't make it a slugfest. Whereas, again, Josh Taylor will go nose to nose with you like he did against Prograis and just stay in that phone booth and just pick his spots and trust his abilities that, hey, we could be more or less head to head. I'm going to let my combinations go a lot more intelligently, a lot more crisply, a lot quicker. And the jury's still out on who has the greater punching power. I think some might think that Jose Ramirez does. I'm like, not so fast. I mean, I've seen Josh Taylor do a lot of damage in that ring. So we don't know who's got the greater punching power, even though Jose Ramirez looked like a wrecking ball against Maurice Hooker. But in this fight, I see Jose Ramirez having trouble with, you know, Josh Taylor being a southpaw, Josh Taylor probably having the quicker hand speed, and I think it's more likely that Josh Taylor is able to win more of the combinations in more of the rounds to where he starts edging these rounds on the scorecard, depending on how these first couple rounds play out. I expect, you know, Josh Taylor to start off pretty fast. He likes to make his presence felt pretty quickly. I expect Jose Ramirez to do the same. So, I mean, I think that these first 2-3 rounds are going to be very, very interesting because nobody wants to play beta to the other to where the judges kind of get lulled into giving rounds to a particular guy based on how the fight starts. I don't think anybody wants to be on the losing side to that psychology. So the question is, who's landing more of the punches? I know Jose Ramirez is really going to try to work that body. Josh Taylor hits to the body too. But I think Josh Taylor can be a slightly busier fighter, even though I don't want to underestimate Jose Ramirez's volume either. I just think that Josh Taylor might be throwing the more crisp combinations, and as long as he doesn't get caught totally slipping with his hand down where he gets rocked on the side of the head by Jose Ramirez's vicious power punches, that he should do enough to win most of the rounds. I don't think he's going to stop Jose Ramirez. I'm sure both these guys want to stop each other, but I think it's more likely that the king of the 140-pound division will be crowned, hence the Biggie T, to Josh Taylor via unanimous decision. I'm looking at maybe 8 rounds to 4, something like that. I mean, I just don't see Josh Taylor getting pinned up against the ropes a whole lot. I don't see him like backing up a ton from Ramirez either. Man, it's going to be so fun if it becomes a battle of attrition. Fun for us fans, not fun for these guys, but damn, this could be very, very interesting. Because Jose Ramirez fights with such spirit and grit to where it's tough to see him succumb to the other guy standing his ground against him. It's like something's got to give here. And I don't see either of these guys giving, and I see Taylor winning more of the rounds. Man, this is a tough one to call. Whew. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, please. And, you know, check out my other video if you get a chance. It's more a road to here, but I was also talking about the fact that this fight has huge ramifications. Not only, obviously, in 140, where all 4 belts, again, are on the line, but it'll have ramifications at 135 because Teofimo Lopez, the undisputed champ right now at 135, plans to, sooner than later, if he handles business against George Kambosos, which I'll do a preview video to that, but he wants to go up to 140 to take on the winner of this fight so that you basically have the undisputed guy at 135 and the undisputed guy at 140, both guys holding all 4 belts in their respective divisions clashing against each other. So this fight is important for that reason, and also because these guys are eventually going to be fighting at 147. So the winner of this can have big things ahead at the weight class above, and even the loser of this fight can have big things ahead depending on how they lose at 147. And Regis Prograis is still waiting in the wings. He still wants to get his get back against Josh Taylor. And again, I would love to see Prograis versus Ramirez as well. And I'm sure that Jose Zepeda, the guy who gave Ramirez a super even fight, is going to want a crack at the title as well. In fact, he's on Jose Ramirez versus Josh Taylor's undercard. So on the same night that they're fighting, Jose Zepeda is going to be fighting as well. So yeah, there's a lot to digest in this one, and I can't wait because, again, I'm picking Josh Taylor via decision, but this one kind of has the makings of being a tremendous fight because, again, neither of these guys is the mouse in the cat and mouse scenario. Even though they have very different methods of asserting themselves, they both assert themselves on their front foot in different ways. It's going to be very interesting to see how this one plays out. But please, leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.